Right, let's do a podcast, Chris.
This time yesterday, Dan, I was on the floor of a train drinking mojitos out of a can. So
stay classy, Chris. Stay classy.
Always nothing but class. Is what they call me.
That's where we got nothing but static from as a podcast title. We were just jumping off of your already existing nickname.
My rep.
Yeah.
My reputation.
Yeah. Anyway, let's do a podcast. Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. Today we're sitting down to watch Out of the Past. I want to give that some oomph, Chris. Was that enough oomph?
That was good. I'm just laughing because I feel like this series has been cursed. Like, because you're finally sort of not coughing as much. And we've just had, and we don't need to go into it all, but we've just like lamented the loss of your laptop for about, 25 minutes, half an hour. And then at the very end, I was like, yeah, I'm really tired because I think I said because this time last night I was sitting on the floor of a train drinking mojitos out of a can. And I'm just like, I mean, will we ever do an episode of this podcast where we're both firing on all cylinders? Maybe one day. Maybe for the finale.
I think, look, 100% is a rarity on any of our podcasts. And at this point, our listeners know this.
Yes,
do you know what I mean?
We won't let it get us, guys. Don't worry. It's gonna be because let's be honest, Dan. It's a fucking great episode of Korra. Is what we're dealing with here.
It is a great episode of Korra. Shall I briefly recap?
Tell the kids what happened, Dan.
So, the story of Korra, and she's been kidnapped, and she's all like, "Oh no, I've been kidnapped," and what's his face? Oh God, maybe even I'm not. You set it up that you're going to be the problem this week, and I think immediately it seems like that's not the case. Tarlok is back at the old office, being all like, "Oh, Korra was kidnapped by Equalists," making up some old lie to make it look like he didn't attack and kidnap her himself. And the cough's come back. Good timing, cough. Very good. That's what this cursed episode of the podcast absolutely needed. So Tenzin and the gang all wander out. Oh, Lin Beifong comes back, and her first act is to go back to the prison that she was, I assume, previously in some way connected to as her job of chief of police. She goes in. She's like, "I'm getting you out," with no. Like, how did she do that? I don't know. She did that. And then they all go off with Tenzin to try and find Korra, and they follow the route of, they think she's been kidnapped by the Equalists. They break into an Equalist hideout. They go, "Hey, Equalists, have you got Korra?" They're like, "No." And they're like, "Well, we immediately believe you. So Tarlok must have Korra." So then they go to try and get Tarlok. Tarlok's all like, "Oh, I'm a bloodbender. Look at me doing bloodbending." And he's revealed himself. So he escapes, crap, now everyone knows I'm a bloodbender. And he goes back to where he's got Korra trapped. And she's been having some dreams that have told her the whole backstory, and she's all like, "I know who you are. You're the son of a guy called Yakone, who was a bloodbender in the past that my previous self fought. Look at you." And he's like, "Yeah." And he tried to rule the city through crime, and I'm going to rule it through politics. And she's like, "That's somehow even more evil." And then Amon shows up and seemingly takes away his bending and tries to kidnap Korra. Everyone's trying to kidnap Korra this year. That's all anyone seems to be interested in doing. But she escapes because, story needs to happen, I guess. And we're left sort of in that position. That was the least succinct one I've done all year. Good work.
Yeah, I mean, basically, guys, just imagine that, but with better dialogue.
No, the dialogue was great. I'm pretty sure, Chris, I was reading that verbatim from the transcript, so... I would forgive someone, Chris, for thinking I was just playing the audio of the episode in some of those exchanges,
just on super speed.
Yeah,
I was very pleased when Lynn showed up because I was like, boom, predicted that bad boy. Yes, I was very pleased. I think for how exciting is this episode for an episode that is actually very exposition heavy.
Yeah, I think if you're going to do an exposition-heavy episode, this is probably the way to do it, right? Because it's still fairly action-packed. It's you know what it is? It's kind of a cheat because this story, we end where we ended last week. We've just got information. That's the only thing that's changed.
Yeah, you're right.
What's practically changed other than Tarlok being revealed, but Korra figured that out last week when he attacked her and bloodbended her. Just the rest of the gang didn't know. You know, that's the biggest shift, right? Like, other than that, like, all this is just giving us some backstory, which is just pure exposition.
Tarlok losing his bending ability, I suppose.
Right, yes, that is true. Yeah, and I guess what that confirms that we didn't previously know, but again, this is just exposition, is that Tarlok and Amon not working together, or seemingly at least. Because we were speculating last week if those two were because it felt like Tarlok was playing into Amon's hands with some of his choices, but actually it seems like he was just a power hungry politician.
It's quite an extreme attitude, quite an extreme cover up if they are working together, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation because I just think you're right. I'm thinking about what this episode achieves, and it basically just gives us Tarlok's backstory and then takes his bending away, and everything else is just like this person is here now. They're here now. They're here. There's no real actual plot.
No, but do you think it's like you say the action sequences are so good? Well, there's I think there's two. One, there is as big fans, they get points for Aang, Toph, and Sokka, don't they? Let's just call it what it is. Like, the episode wins a lot round for that. But more than that, I think the other highlight I would give to this episode is it's kind of the opposite of, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, but there was an episode where, one of the ongoing plots was just briefly sort of, mentioned offhand in a scene. Whereas, for example, in this, we're building... It's love triangle bullshit, but again, as we've been consistent with, if the love triangle bullshit's going to be done well, fine. It rarely is done well, but in this episode, it's done well. The stuff with Marco and...
Asami?
Sorry.
Asami.
Pardon, sorry? Asami. And Asami basically talking to...
Bullen.
Fucking Bullen, thank you. It's a partnership, this podcast, and indeed this sentence.
Chris has interesting thoughts on the episode, and I repeat what happened in the episode, and then give him the names of the characters.
the Asami asking about Marco, and
he's so close. Bullen, Korra.
Huh?
I don't know. I'm just giving you names.
No, it was a joke. It was a joke. It was Korra I was going for, but of course I remember Korra's name. But I just wanted to.
Well, that's what threw me because I was like, it can't be Korra because he wouldn't forget Korra's name, which is why I then suggested different ones. But yeah, that makes sense.
You're like, have you had a mojito now? Her asking about.
Chris, I lost my laptop last night. It was a long night. There was a funeral held. It's been very emotional. It's been a big day. So if I'm a little loopy.
What, and you're saying you've avoided. Oh, I thought you were going to reveal that you were drunk.
No. I'm just saying, lack of sleep and a bit of a stressful. I wish I hadn't checked my laptop last night. That's what I tell you what I wish I'd done. I wish I'd come home from work and gone straight to bed instead of discovering my laptop was dead and then losing half my night trying to fix it. Because there was no way I'd have been able to sleep soundly, knowing there were things I hadn't tried yet.
You know what I wish I'd done, Dan? Not been a moron and realised that and mistook that. Have you ever done this? I've done this so many times in hotels. Mistook the net curtain things for actual curtains because it's dark when you get into the room, and then at 4 a.m. you're wide awake because those things don't keep in any light because the actual fucking curtains are clearly visible in front of it and you've not drawn them.
That's an interesting one.
That's what I wish I'd. Yeah, and I tell you, because also those net things, they are see-through, I'd imagine, when there's a big old light on in the room. So I tell you, anyone looking in that window at 2 a.m. as I was getting ready for bed got quite the show. Anyway, my point is, love triangle bullshit handled really well this episode because there's multiple scenes, we can see it building, we can see the tension building. I just like the fact that we kept kind of going back to it. We kept having Lynn give looks, reacting to Marco and his relationship with Korra. I thought, this episode, I think the thing about this show is if all the things that this show does well are being done well, and, love triangle bullshit, the serialization of it, juggling multiple stories at once, this episode for me is a great example of all of those cylinders firing well and being done well. Like everything we've praised this show for, feeling different to Avatar, the serialized plots, the juggling multiple things, its fresh take on the city, which maybe isn't as present in this, but it's certainly its evolution of the world is in a number of different ways. From Lynn using an evolved version of Toph's bending to us getting to see insights into how Sokka and Aang and how things were done when they were around. Everything I think we've complimented this show on is present in this episode. And it's, I think it's great because of that.
And here we observe the wild Chris as he expertly gets the podcast back on track. Very good. I can't believe you span off the curtains conversation into that. That's what I'm impressed with.
I think it's really generous of you to call that a conversation, as opposed to a man just reminiscing about something that he couldn't really explain, that you had no real experience of, and actually wasn't even that funny. So,
I mean, at this point, it's just you beating yourself up. I don't know what to do with that. Chris, save the making fun of Chris for me. That's my job. Like, I don't.
Well, respond to what I said. Do you agree? Were you as taken with this episode as I was?
Yeah, no, I do. I really like this episode. I think it is a good episode. I don't think it's one of the best of the season for reasons that we talked about. I just think, like, in terms of like the plot is just a thin series of like go here, fetch quests, just to allow us to do the other stuff. But the other stuff is really good, so I think that's okay. I don't mind episodes like this when you do have a lot of stuff to get through. There's so much information you need to convey to an audience in this episode, and trying to make a more complex or more intricate plot or doing something more interesting with the plot might have been more weight than the episode could bear, and it may have buckled under it. So I don't think that observation is a criticism. There are some, there's a few weird things about this episode. Like I mentioned in the intro, I think it's strange that Lynn can just get people out of prison. She's no longer chief of police. I don't really know how she did that. I don't really understand Tarlok's plan.
She kicks some ass. What do you mean? She kicks some ass and went, and she wasn't, it wasn't official police business. She was just kicking ass, wasn't she?
Did she break in? Was it a breakout?
Yeah, I think it plays as a.
So you think she's she's like on the lam now? She's a criminal now?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. That could be true. That's not how I read it, but yeah. But also, I'm not 100% sure. I was torn on Tarlok's plan as well, because his lie is kind of both strange and makes a lot of sense. So, on the surface, when you first think about it, you go, well, his plan makes a lot of sense, right? Because he lies, he says the Equalist took Korra, and that's actually a really good way to explain the damage to his office, Korra being missing, all of that stuff. But, as is proved in the episode, Chris, all it takes is talking to the Equalists, and it becomes pretty clear that's not what happened. We'll brush by the fact that they just immediately believe the villains. When the villains say, we don't have Korra, they go, right, it must be Tarlok then. Which is an amazing leap of logic. But let's just assume that we're on board with that. Tarlok's supposed to be a master manipulator, politician man. He must have known that lie couldn't last for long, right? It wouldn't have taken long because I go, oh, well, he's leading them down a merry path. It makes sense that it'd be the Equalists. They're going to waste a bunch of time investigating the Equalists. They'll get nowhere, and it'll buy him some time. That's my initial thinking on his plan. But then I'm like, what does it last? Like 2 hours? How long until they immediately find out the Equalists don't have Korra? Like, it doesn't take them long. So, like, what was Tarlok's plan long term with that lie? It seems sensible on the surface, but like. He was bound to be caught out. There was so few ways he was going to get out of this. Once he, kidnapped the Avatar, what was his plan? Just have her kidnapped forever and keep doing politics? And hope it never comes out that it wasn't him, that it wasn't the Equalist that took her? I don't know. It's a strange plan, man. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it didn't quite, fit. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't. I wasn't so bothered by that because we don't know that. He doesn't even. He's clearly scared of Anon when he sees him, but I guess it didn't strike me because we don't really know how much of a relationship he has with Anon. So I guess that's why it didn't strike me. I didn't find myself thinking watching it. Well, surely Anon's going to be like, nah, not me. And the Equalists aren't, but yeah, no, there was that one dude who was very quickly like, oh no, that's not us. They're like, oh, okay,
right, yeah, but I think
that is weird.
Yeah, I guess you're right because I guess from your perspective, flicking this episode on, based on what we were talking about last week, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you were leaning towards Amon and Tarlok being in cahoots.
Yeah, bonded, connected in some way, which I still think they probably are.
Do you think so? Even after this,
definitely. Yeah, not in cahoots, but connected in some way. Yeah, Anon was like the actions of a man that knows him for sure. Like takes his power away, but then picks him up and walks away with him. Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. So, yeah, so I guess going into the episode, if you're assuming that they're working together. Or because obviously, now you might not necessarily think that anymore, but now you think they're connected. But going into the episode, I think you were leaning towards that they were in cahoots. I guess it makes sense that his plan would have seemed on the surface kind of sensible, blame it on the Equalists, and then he can continue being a politics guy, because the likelihood is when they go investigate the Equalists, that might be who Korra is with. He might have passed her on to an Equalist hideout. But yeah, knowing how it actually plays out and that's not the case, his plan when you think back on his plan, you just go, I don't know what your plan was long term. Like, that was a very, buys you a few hours sort of plan at most. And I'm not so sure. Maybe I misunderstood it, or, maybe there's an element of it an angle on it I'm not thinking of. But yeah, that seemed a bit strange to me. So let's talk about the big stuff. Let's talk about, we see Aang, Sokka, and Toph in the council room. This is the stuff. Last week you said, Chris, when we started this, I didn't know if I wanted flashbacks, but now I'm like, give me them flashbacks. This week you got the flashbacks. How are you feeling about the flashbacks?
I like the flashbacks. I like the way they were used. I like the juxtaposition of seeing the flashbacks of the team of old in the courtroom suffering, and then cutting to the new team in the courtroom suffering. I thought that was very nicely done. The juxtaposition of shit, we're still very much in this situation, was nicely done. I think, to be honest, knowing it got resolved, we essentially saw the resolution of it in that we see. I'm just going to call him Yakult. I don't know his name. I know it begins with a Y.
I think you're close. It's Yakone.
Yakone. Oh, well, it's, good gut health is important, guys.
I'd have to go back and check, but I actually had a pet theory as I was watching this episode that some different actors were pronouncing it differently. I think it was sometimes Yakone and sometimes Yakon. So...
okay.
I'm not 100% sure how we got there, but I think the actor playing Aang really lent into Yakone as his delivery, and I think everyone else was kind of somewhere in the middle, maybe, or one or the other. But right. I don't know. I'd have to go back and check. But as I was watching it, I was like, is everyone saying this the same? I'm not sure everyone is saying this the same. But anyway.
Since we saw Aang capture him and take away his bending,
Yeah.
I would have liked that fight between him and Aang to go on a bit longer. I was sat there desperate for Aang to for us to see him use all 4 elements in just a kick-ass way. And I know we got that in the finale of, Airbender, but I really wanted that. I wanted to see Aang Avatar at the height of his powers, like busting out fire, water, earth, and air all over the place. And we got some great stuff. We got some great air and earth stuff. But I really would have liked that fight to have been longer and just for us to have had a bit more Aang at the height of his powers.
Yeah, I wrote notes about it, like just being like, it is really cool to see Aang at like height of his power. But yeah, it did feel like he was very leaning on his airbending, which is what he did in the show. So I guess that makes sense, and it's a cool visual. Aang bursting out of the courtroom or the council hall, whatever room that is, and then like coming down the street, like his airbender robes all flapping in the breeze, just looking like he absolutely wants to murder someone. It's a really cool visual, and it's just so cool to see adult Aang being such a badass. But you're right, I think it might have been nicer to see him, sort of using all the elements, because I think that would have really put a nail in the premise of this being height of his power Aang, height of his mastered all the elements. We got to see him just having mastered fire. He'd only just figured out fire. And the way that in the last episode he mostly got away with doing all the impressive stuff was being in the Avatar state. And leaning on the knowledge of the past Avatars. I think what could have been an opportunity here would have been to see Aang not using the Avatar state, but still being an absolute master of all the elements. Sort of showing us the fully realized version of that character on his own merit, not just by leaning on his ancestors, his predecessors, I suppose, is a better word.
Yeah, especially as it's the Avatar state that ultimately allows him to defeat him. I think defeating him with some sort of kick-ass bending, I think I would have preferred personally.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. I think I agree. But it's still a really cool moment. The only thing I will say, and I can't decide how I feel about this, right? Because there's a part of me that goes, well, if we're going to bring Aang and Toph and Sokka back, right? I want them to be doing all their old gags. I want Sokka to be talking about his trusty boomerang, and I want Toph to call Aang Twinkle Toes. I want all of that stuff, right? Because I'm just a child. But sometimes the things you want, sometimes the creators need to rein you in for you, right? If everyone had got on the movie they wanted, Multiverse of Madness would have been a mess, So, part of me goes like, "What is it? Was it a bit too much? Like everyone was just going back to their old classics, Twinkle Toes, Trusty Boomerang. I don't know."
Not the Toph one, because I think the Toph one was, they were on their way somewhere. It was playful.
You think that one? You think the Toph one felt natural? Is what essentially you're saying? Is that
the Toph one? Yes, I do. The Sokka one felt forced in. The fact that we don't really cut to anyone else, because obviously it's fucking wildly inappropriate. Like him doing that in that moment is just a bit weird. We might cut to other people. I can't remember. But I think the Sokka one just feels out of place for the moment. And also, Sokka takes that stuff very seriously. So I think, I think he maybe would have been more serious in that moment, or maybe they just did the joke a bit too much. They went on about it a bit too much. It could have maybe been a one-liner or something. But I see what you're saying more in the Sokka one than I do in the Toph one, which didn't bother me as much.
Yeah, right. I don't know. It just felt a little. It just felt like it felt deliberately like, "Hey fans, you ready? You ready? Say the thing." And they like poke Sokka, and he goes boomerang, and everyone goes, "Yay!"
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, And if they'd have had Zuko in there, it'd have been like poke him, and he goes honor, and everyone goes, "Yay!"
Suddenly, Iroh comes in, starts giving out tea.
Yay! Spouting wisdom. Yeah, I want it. The thing is, again, I get it. I wanted it myself. My primal brain wants Sokka to be so distinctly Sokka, so I can be like, look, it's Sokka. But like, there's also like sometimes sometimes you want to eat a bunch of junk food, and that's bad for you too. Like, you can't always it's not always good for you to get what you want, is my point. So definitely something I had in mind as I was watching. So I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, I guess for me, the novelty of those scenes has long worn off, having seen them, 3-4 times, or whatever viewing I'm up to now of this show. So it's kind of tricky because, like, I'm no longer getting the nostalgic hit, because this is kind of like, I know this is coming. I'm well aware of what the scenes contain and what's said. First viewing, I probably lost my shit, But I wonder, if you were to watch these episodes a couple more times, or run it through the show a few more times, in 5-10 years' time, if we were to come back to it, would you feel the same way about those scenes as I do now? Which is kind of like, I love them because it's so nice to see those characters, but there's just something a little bit forced about some of it.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, no, I definitely think that's fair. Maybe they should have only done one and not the other. Like for me personally, the choice would be to do the tough one and not the soccer one. Yeah,
I think that's fair. But I understand. I also understand their impulse to be like, well, we're not just going to have one character show up. We'll have two. We'll have, obviously Aang has to show up because it's an Aang memory, because that's how Korra would be able to see it. But how many other characters from that original show do we include? I do have a question though for the audience, because I suspect they might have the answer that I don't have here. There's an airbender on the council that's not Aang, and Aang's only 40, so his kids presumably are at best 20. Doesn't appear to be any of them. It seems like an older guy. Even if Aang had his kids pretty young.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who the fuck's the airbender?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know.
And I get it. Like, you want someone from every nation on the council. That's the whole premise of Republic City. But who the fuck's the guy? Like, because there was no Air Nation. So, and he's 40 now. So this is about 30 years after the original show, like 20 odd 30 years after the original run. So obviously there's been some time. But is this guy an airbender, or is he just an air nomad? Like, no bending. Oh man, my throat's been fine all day. Of course, it's gotten tickly now as we're recording. What a nightmare. Anyway.
Yeah, we had like a whole... I don't remember you coughing once during our pre-podcast laptop lament.
No. Yeah, no. It comes and goes in waves, and it's just, you can't predict when it'll happen. Like, there's just something like dislodges, like, and it just gets a bit weirdly. It's like it's scratching regularly, and then it just suddenly I'm having a cough all the time. I think it's once I've talked a lot. I noticed this today. I was on the phone for a while with someone, and the first 10-15 minutes of the phone call I was fine, and then I was coughing a lot. I think it's when it might be agitated by talking for long periods of time, which, funnily enough, Chris, is kind of what we do here.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Do you? I don't think you gave an opinion. Do you agree that the love triangle bullshit was done well this week?
Yeah, I mean, as well as it's been done in this show so far, I think this is one of the better examples of it. I think it is a bit strange because Asami seems a lot more self-confident, not self-confident, a lot more like... Asami comes across as a character that's a little bit more secure in herself than Korra. So it's weird to see Asami acting Korra-esque and being jealous. I feel like Asami should maybe have been a little less overtly jealous, because I just don't 100%. So I think it's handled well for what it is. I'm just not sure it's 100% true to Asami as a character thus far. I don't know. Does that fit to you? Does that make sense? Am I saying things that make sense, or am I just talking up my ass? I could be.
Well, I think you are, but you can add sort of, maybe this is fansplaining, but if you think about the context, you know what I mean? She's just had this huge falling out with her father. She's staying, her and time has passed. Her and Marco have become close. At this point, Marco is the person in her life, the consistent, and she's now going, oh shit, I might lose him to the Avatar.
Right. And I guess it's the thing the episode does lean on is the reveal that they did kiss previously. So it's not
Yeah,
just... I suppose the way they get away with it is that, because if it was just Mako's worried about Korra, then you'd be like, calm down, Asami, they're friends. That makes sense. He's not worried about you right now because you're next to him and you're fine. You know? But, like, I guess it's the kiss thing that really pushes it over the edge for her and makes her a bit more jealous this episode. And that is a reveal for her. She didn't know that previously.
Yeah, because just like her father, he's lied to her and kept something from her.
Now that's an interesting thought, because we have the concept of a lying through omission, right? Like you know, you're lying by not mentioning a thing. If it happened did it? I can't remember. See, you know, it happened after he met Asami, didn't he? Didn't it? They were like kind of seeing each other. Sort of... So,
because like even in that episode where Bolin originally brings up going on a date with Korra, Marco's like, yeah, but I'm with Asami and that's going well, and that's the episode where they kiss.
Right, you're right. So I guess then, yeah, she's got a lot of reason to be, upset. There,
I think
with
so,
him.
and I just wanted your view. I'm pleased to hear you say you also enjoyed that element of it.
I think it's really well handled. I think it's one of those things where, her reactions, like in this episode, are handled like they don't really overpower the episode. They're kind of like, the story is progressing, these conversations are happening. It's kind of actually some of the stuff they've done already has been like this. So I don't know if this is a compliment necessarily specifically for this episode or just in general with how they've handled this stuff. With the exception of that one episode where it was the focus, generally speaking, these things have been happening alongside the plot, little side conversations, brief moments between the progression, and I think that's probably the best way to play this out. I think when they took a whole episode to put focus on it is actually when it fell apart the most. So
maybe it's interesting, isn't it? Because maybe that's, thinking about it, some of the episodes we've loved the most have done what this episode does, which, if you think about it, this episode advances the Talak plot, advances the love triangle bullshit plot, advances the flashback plot, advances Korra via Non, like Anon, however you say it.
I think it's Amon maybe, with an M.
Amon, sorry. Maybe this show is at its best when it is incredibly serialized, and when you've got an episode that is, instead of focusing on one thing, covering, do you know what I mean? Moving things along on all of it.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that's proving the further in we go, that's proving to be very true. I think that the episodes we've enjoyed the best have been sort of serialized, and I think they figure that out, and that is the thing that separates Korra from Last Airbender the most. I think obviously Last Airbender's final season, it got a lot more serialized as we got to the big finale, but generally speaking, Last Airbender, there's each episode kind of has a plot, and even in that final season there's like Ember Island Players that has a really specific plot, there's that beach episode that has a really specific plot. Actually no, the beach episode might be from the season before. It might be.
No, anyway, I think the beach episode's series 3.
I can't remember, but anyway,
I'm sure beach is series 3.
The episode where they go after Katara's mother's killer, that's like a single episode of its own story. I think the Boiling Rock two-parter is there, and that's its own story. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that happens, even in, as Avatar reaches its final season, where it is still doing these self-contained episodes. It's like, this is our plot. This is not. And look, for better or worse, I could absolutely see somebody saying like, "Oh, that's actually the thing that I'd like the least about what Korra does. It means the show is often muddled or a little imbalanced." I could absolutely see that, and I get that as a satisfying episode to watch. This is so much harder to review than an episode of Avatar with an BC sort of plot that just flows through beginning, middle, and end like a 3-act structure. Because it's like, how do you review this piece of a puzzle? Like, it's way harder to review Korra, I think, or I'm discovering that as we go, than it is to review Avatar. But I think you're right. I think this show's proven that its strengths are in using a wider canvas to tell stories. I'm not 100% sure they figured out how to maximize the potential of that yet. Personally, I think they do as the seasons go on. I think particularly, the last 2 seasons are some of the show's best stuff. And I think that's just a symptom of, they were writing a show that was episodic for a long time. They came in and they had to adjust the format for this. So makes a lot of sense to me that that it would take a couple episodes or even a season or two to really perfect it. And that doesn't mean that this season or even the second season, that the one that follows, is bad. I just think like they really sort of start to find their feet from the third season, I think. So yeah.
Which is exciting, like because I'm enjoying it so much, at the point where you don't even think it's necessarily found its feet. Like that's very
right,
exciting.
because I think they're just trying to work out how to balance that. Because like you said, we had that episode earlier in the year that was like purely love triangle bullshit, and it was not good. It's arguably, and the winner is the weakest episode of the season we've sat through so far, right? And no, not and the winner is, it's the one before that, right? Spirit of Competition is the weakest episode we've yet witnessed, and that was one that was really focused on one plot. And the episodes we've enjoyed the most have been the ones that have been pushing several plots. And in fact, you could go right back if you want to hear some consistency in our opinions on this. You can go back to the very first episode and hear us complimenting how many different plots they're setting up. And then even watching the second episode, and they introduce the bending and Marco and Bolin, enjoying that they're adding even more to that. Even more plates that they've got spinning. Does it work out perfectly in this first season? No, there's some bumps, there's some weird episodes that like maybe don't have as much balance as the others, or there's some weird consistency things where they're trying to it's like Lynn vanishes for an episode, comes back in another. It's like how to know when to bring her back, do something with her. There's things where they're sort of like, you can see them trying to figure out how to tell this story long form. And, someone could argue this episode suffers from doing a lot of exposition and a lot of information, but not really actually pushing the physical plot forward too much, which is what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast. And I think that's a fair criticism. And I think that's a result of them sussing out how to tell these serialized stories. And and it's so hard to then judge a single piece of it as a piece of entertainment, because we're not saying did it have a complete story anymore. We're now asking ourselves, were these pieces satisfying and valuable on their own? Did the episode flow well? And I think the end of this episode, we resolve the Korra kidnapped plot, I guess, which is what this episode starts with its premise as being. We should talk about that, actually, because I'm still not sure how I feel about she just sort of runs away and then Naga like finds her. Like, it seems a little simple. It seems a little easy. I don't know. How did you feel about that?
It's a little Deus Ex Nadia, isn't it? Is that what the animal's called?
Naga. Naga, I think.
Naga. So that joke would have been so much better if I'd got the name right. But yeah, because I don't think we set up that Naga's sort of roaming, do we? Which we could have done,
They do it in like a really backwards way. Someone says Naga could find Korra. Naga could find Korra's scent, and then someone says Naga is also missing, and you go, "Oh, that's weird. Did Tarlok grab Naga also?" But then you sort of dismiss it, and then the reveal later is the reason Naga was missing is because when Korra got kidnapped, seemingly Naga went off after
he
Korra.
went looking. Yeah, he went looking for her.
Right.
It feels a little clunky maybe, but I did love how she escaped. I loved her using logic and that scene where we cut back into the box and she's being electrocuted, but she's not getting the full might of it because she's hanging on with that fabric. I thought that was kick-ass. I thought that was brilliant. So I was probably still thinking about that when the Naga thing happened, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, no, to be fair, she did that. Yeah, that is like the character getting themselves out of the situation, which is kind of what you want to see, right? I guess the Naga thing is more just a convenience of how do we get her back to the city without her freezing to death. So they did that. Naga is really solving that problem more than the actual escape, I suppose. It's not like Naga comes in, knocks Amon over, and bites the cage open. That'd be much worse.
One thing I wanted to zero in on, we've talked a lot about how this show takes ideas from Last Airbender and evolves them. The evolution of the horror of bloodbending
Mm-hmm.
was executed beautifully in this episode.
Right.
You know, those scenes where he bloodbends the entire courtroom, like, and you know the fact that we see bloodbending used as a tool to lift people in the air. Not entirely sure how that works. Are they moving the? Is he moving the air particles? I don't know.
You can move water into the air when you're waterbending. So
Right. Okay.
if you're
Yeah,
bending the
same
blood
logic.
inside people, you could lift them by lifting the blood that's inside of them, I guess.
Makes sense. Yeah. No,
I makes it sound right. I'm kind of with you that it's like I don't 100% follow the logic of that, but like that, yeah, I just about buy that. That makes some sense to me.
Yeah. No. No. That makes sense. I'm down with that for sure. So love that the horror of bloodbending at its full might on display. I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, and I think you pointed out, that tying them together, because that sort of quote unquote courtroom scene that we keep talking about, it seems to be the same council hall that they use, still to this day, so it's the same room. Tarlok is in the present, bloodbending everyone, is the same room, it seems, that Yakon once did the same, and that's a really cool parallel. But you're right, and I also like Sokka laying it out a bit, because I just think, sometimes, we talked about this with Avatar occasionally, it's a kids show. Sometimes you can't just be subtle, you gotta lay it out, right? And while there's been plenty of evidence in the show of how bending has come along a great way, visually we've seen that lightning, being able to turn fire into lightning or do lightning as fire now, is common enough that that's a job for some people. They're just working at the power plant, just pumping electricity into the city's grid all day. That's their job. We've seen that the police force are pretty commonly mental, but most of the officers, certainly in Lynn's main battalion, or whatever you want to call them, battalion's the wrong word, squad, they are all metal benders. Clearly some of these more advanced forms of bending have become way more commonplace, and have evolved in quite some time. So actually, while an observant person would have been taking all that in and commenting on that, I think if you're a kid just watching this kind of casually, having Sokka spell it out in this episode when talking about bloodbending, and trying to convince a courtroom that Yakon could be doing it without the benefit of the full moon, by going, well, look, we didn't think metal bending was a thing until our chief of police did it. So maybe, let's consider the possibilities that bending can be pushed into ways we didn't expect, and let's not dismiss the possibility.
Just the horror of him going, of him getting sentenced and then going, fuck it, and just like blood bending everyone. I just thought that scene was just so effective.
Because that's actually a good point, because historically we've only ever seen it done on one person. So the shock of being able to do it to a whole room of people, that is such an advanced version of that power. That's so much more powerful than we've ever seen bloodbending before. The ability to control essentially a crowd of people is a new level, absolutely. And obviously, not needing to do it at midnight, not midnight, sorry, at a full moon. Also a big reveal. Well, we had that last week actually, because that's when Tarlok did it. But so you're right. The way they animate it, a lot of that is obviously borrowed horror from the original bloodbending episode, because it's the way the bodies contort when they're being bloodbent that's always upsetting to my brain. I don't like it. But it's cool here. I like it here, because it's exactly used correctly to be upsetting, which is what it's supposed to be. How did you feel about the designs of the adult characters? We hadn't really talked about this yet. So this is our proper look. We've had glimpses. If we'd have been willing to freeze frame on previous viewings, we'd have already seen these designs. But seeing them in motion and talking to each other, how do we feel about adult Toph, Sokka, and Aang?
I mean, adult Toph is quite. It's quite similar to young Toph, really, isn't she? But I guess she's a little bit younger, maybe. So I thought that made sense. To be honest with you, Sokka's adult voice threw me way more than how Sokka looks as an adult. That was because is it? So what happened? Did all the voice actors come back? Because Toph's voice sounded very similar. I couldn't almost work out whether Sokka's voice was a whole different actor.
They're all different actors. None of them are the same.
Right. Okay.
And I'll tell you now, Sokka is voiced by Chris Hardwick.
Oh, maybe it's that then. Maybe it was just the familiarity. That's what got me, and that's what I was picking up on. Maybe it's that.
So all three characters have
thing
new voice actors for their adult selves.
Maybe that's the thing that made me go, there's something a bit off here, and I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's that I was recognising Chris Hardwick's voice.
Yeah, and I think I think they'll do a really good job. It is weird to hear Aang being an adult and like with a grown-up man voice. It's upsetting to my brain again, like the bloodbending. But that's only because I'm used to the other thing, not because it's actually wrong. I think all three actors do a good job. It's very hard to hear those voices coming out of those characters when you're so used to them. But I think they do a really good job. I think they cast all three pretty well. They all sound like that could very well be what that character would sound like once their voice sort of dropped and they became an adult.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's have a quick glance then. I'm sure I've got some other notes of things we could probably talk about. Oh yeah, let's talk a little bit about Yakone and the whole backstory. So Yakone is leader of the underworld, is what we get revealed. We talked about this I mentioned it briefly, I think, in my recap. And the idea is that Yakone tried to take over the city through being a leader of the underworld, being a criminal gang lord guy, using his blood bending to sort of keep people under his thumb. Got caught by Aang, had his bending taken away, but it seems like his son had similar ideas, but he changed his name, denounced his father, sort of separated himself, took a new name, and has sort of positioned himself to take over the city like his father tried to do, but with politics instead. As a backstory / motivation for that character, how are you feeling about all that reveal? Because I think we've talked around it a lot, because a lot of the scenes we've talked about are scenes that reveal that information, but we haven't specifically actually broke down what we think that means for Tarlok as a villain. Do you think that's a compelling motive for a character like him? Do you think it makes sense with everything we've seen him do? How are you feeling about it in general?
Yeah, I think it tracks. It's familiar beats, but I think that's fine. I think the notion of I'm gonna try a different way, same goal, but I'm gonna try a different way makes sense. I think that's another thing about. Maybe that plays into my the fight scene between Aang and his dad's a bit too quick, because it didn't really feel like, they had one fight and he got captured and then presumably he got, sent to prison or whatever. But I feel like maybe there needs to be, or maybe there is, but it's off screen, more history between, Aang as an avatar and him, or his embarrassment maybe.
Right.
But other than that sort of nitpick, as a motivation storyline, I think it absolutely tracks.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier you think there could still be a link between Amon and Tarlok. What have you got any idea what you think that might be? What you think the link is? Because this is the first time we've definitively, I think, you asked this question last week and I didn't want to answer because I didn't want to give it away. But this is definitively, I think, the first time we've seen the two characters in the same room and confirmed they are not one in the same, as was thrown out as a possibility last week. What do you think the link is? Because you mentioned it, you thought you still think there's a link. Any theory at all on that at this point, or are you just like feeling in the dark a bit with that one? Because it's yeah.
Well, I think it's got to be someone. Maybe he got put away. The father got put away. I think it's definitely someone that the way he's trying to bloodbend him, and Anon is just walking through it.
Yeah,
felt like someone
that's a badass moment.
It's really badass. It's great. It's gripping. It's very effective, and it feels like someone who knew it was coming. So that's, I think, also part of that was, I said earlier, I think there's still history with them. It's because as that was happening, I was like, oh, he's prepped, or they're prepped for this, and picking up Talik at the end felt very intimate. So logically, that means either childhood friend or sibling, I would say, for predictions on that. I'm only thinking of it on the spot, so I wouldn't want to put a stake in either. But it felt very. I feel like he's got history with Anon, and so childhood friend. Like I say, maybe he was sent away, and they were in an orphanage together, maybe, and he resents that. I don't know, but or it's a sibling, and they were both groomed to kind of want this mission, and they've both gone about it two different ways.
I think it's also possible, if you're going to go that route, the other option, of course, is that they've both gone the opposite way on purpose. Like, it's almost a rejection of his, Amon's whole thing is that he's anti-bending, right? Like, if his dad was, like, the worst bender, if that's theory's the way, if you're saying that they have the same father because they're siblings, that actually tracks for a few different reasons. That makes a lot of sense. Because you could also argue it could be the start of a guy wanting to. It would make sense that a person potentially raised by, like, the worst bender, like one of the most evil benders, a guy that mastered bloodbending masses of people. It would make sense that as a child you might see that in your dad and be like, oh yeah, no, bending's bad.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I like your theories. I think they both really. I think your two sort of main thoughts make sense there.
Nice. Any other notes before
question,
we do the other thing?
I have already asked, haven't I, for someone to... Yeah, I have. Or someone to put it in the comments below. Who do we think the airbender on the council was? I need to know. Let's see. There must be some other stuff in here. No, I think we've... You know what? I think we've covered everything, Chris.
Well, in that case, Dan.
Actually, no. There's one tiny note. Sorry, tiny note, Chris. Milo answering the phone.
I literally breathed in to yell it. Go on, carry on.
Yeah, I know. So that's why I caught it before you did it. I didn't want you to do it because then if you do it, then I'm committing to it. I liked Milo answering the phone early in the episode. That was fun. Weird that we had Milo in this episode, but none of the other airbending kids. I also was wondering, where do we think that little cabin in the mountains actually is? I was wondering about that because Republic City is pretty close to the Fire Nation, right? Because it used to be a Fire Nation Earth Kingdom sort of colony, right? So it's on the northern-ish end of the Earth Kingdom. So there is a northern water tribe, but that's over the water. There's a southern water tribe is right back the other way. And if you get towards them, I assume the mountains start to turn snowy. So is it just winter? And that's actually an Earth Kingdom place? Because it seemed quite close. Naga was able to bring Korra back pretty quick. But it is also snowy. Which brings me to mind of waterbending. So I was trying to figure out where in the world that cabin actually was.
I've got no idea. I could offer nothing other than interesting.
Well, it's just like the place I would think that would, like, a place with snowy, like, mountaintops would have to be at the southern tip of the Earth bending area of the Earth Nation.
Because it's not snowing in Republic City, is it? Like, you're right.
No,
like, that is bizarre. Yeah.
No, and I guess when I was staying in Reykjavik, it wasn't snowy in Reykjavik. But when we went outside of the city where there were mountaintops, it's so much colder at the top of the mountains that there was some snow up there, even though there wasn't necessarily snow at ground level. But for it to be that cold, it's either winter right now, and it is just Earth Kingdom mountains, but in the winter, or he'd gone really south, like towards the Southern Water Tribe. Which seems like it would be too far away to make that make sense. Because it feels like Korra gets on Naga and Naga brings her back in, like, I don't know, half an hour. It feels like she's not, like... It feels like it's not far away, basically.
Because if Avatar teaches us anything, there's the suggestion that none of this shit is that close to each other. Like, whereas in this, they seem to have travelled far pretty quickly.
Right, that's my thinking. I don't know. So it must be quite close by. I guess the fansplaining answer is it is just winter right now, and it was just Earth Kingdom mountain range, but it was high enough up that it was cold enough to have been snowing. I guess
maybe
it's not impossible it could snow in the Earth Kingdom. It generally seems like a hot, dry place, but I guess it must have a winter. Seasons exist, so that must be it.
Yeah. In terms of other specific moments, I did like Bolin's, "Hey, can't I have some privacy?" And it did really, having Sokka back in this episode does make you go, oh, they really are like using Bolin to fill in the Sokka part of the gang, aren't they?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's working. I think I'm falling for it as a trick.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of just like, I'm kind of into it. I like Bolin a lot. He's probably one of my favorite characters right now. Like he's certainly the least burdened. He's the least complicated. I think I like all the other characters have so much going on that I'm just kind of like, Bolin. Oh, Bolin, never change. Sweet, simple Bolin. here to make funny. Do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You make your jokes, Bolin.
We need it.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, cool. So let's do it, Chris. Take a big deep breath, and then let's hit it.
Let's triv it up.
We're gonna give you some trivia. So I'm gonna say bear with me on the trivia because I'm using a 1,000-year-old laptop that's very slow. So if I have any trouble reading through this or working through this, I apologize. Looking at my notes has been a nightmare this episode. The two equalists who discover and empty the tram car were voiced, Chris, by Mikey and Bri, our code names for Michael,
Mikey and Bri,
and Brian Kinitsko in uncredited roles.
Credit yourselves, Mikey and Bri. Jesus.
I know. Apparently, Kinitsko's character, that's Bri, was affectionately referred to as Sassy Chi Blocker.
Nice.
Love it. Thought that was fun. The healer treating Tarlok's wounds is the first male healer we've seen in either series, suggesting that somewhat they've broken down those weird arbitrary restrictions in the Water Tribe about who heals and who fights.
Nice.
Oh, I like that. That's progress. When Aang is going after Yukon, the score Aang's theme from the original series is the music playing in the background. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Even if Korra made contact with her cell, as it was conducting electricity, she would not have received a shock through Faraday cage logic. So
nice.
Basically...
Nice consistency there.
So even if she hadn't done that, if she'd just been stood in there, she should have been fine because the electricity would have passed through the cage and gone down to the earth because electricity seeks the ground. It would not have likely travelled through her body because it wouldn't have needed to. She was not on its route. So there you go.
Nice. I like that there's science to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, but they got it wrong in the show, basically, is what I'm saying.
Oh, I thought you were saying so it would have worked. Sorry, I missed.
Yeah, no. It would basically if they'd have electrocuted the cage with her inside of it. If you'd have set up that exact cage situation in the real world and electrocuted the cage, the person inside would not be electrocuted because the electricity wouldn't need to pass through their body to get to the ground. The shortest route to the ground is just through the metal of the cage.
Okay, so it doesn't. So she didn't need to do the
correct
the fabric trick then, right?
Okay. It's one of those funny things though. I'm always fascinated by hearing stuff about how like electricity would travel because they always say if there's like a big thunderstorm, you probably, or certainly in the old days, you shouldn't be in the shower because apparently one of the routes to the ground, lightning, if it strikes your home, might take. And I don't know if this is still true, but this was certainly true of like homes as they were built. 30, 40 years ago. I don't know if that's still true now, but lightning would likely hit your shower and then get to the end of the shower head and not have anywhere to go but jump through you, who'd be very conductive because you'd be all wet. And especially if you were stood at the time on the metal of the plug at the bottom, you'd be a perfect route to the grounding.
God. Well,
So apparently,
noted. Next time there's
don't
thunder
stay in
and
the
lightning.
shower during a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
I think they tested that on MythBusters, so I would be curious to go back and check if that turned out to be real. But I've read that before. But yeah, if your foot is making contact with the metal plug at the bottom of the shower where the water drains away, and lightning strikes the house, there's a chance it may try to get to that plug and to the ground through you.
Yeah.
Which would I imagine, Chris, not be fun.
No, yeah, it's certainly not, Dan.
I'm making a bold prediction, Chris. Not fun. I'm planting a flag.
Yeah. I think you're okay to make that prediction.
But I know what I'm doing after this podcast, looking up that segment from Mythbusters to see if they figured out that was real or not. Because I'll report back next week.
Come back and I was going to say report back next week. Let us know.
Yeah, we'll do. Anyway, so it was revealed by the creators in Korra, Making of a Legend marathon, that Aang's message to Korra was intended. I'm going to save this one. I don't think this one is a massive spoiler, but I'm going to save this till like next week. Because there's another element of the message that Aang was trying to pass to Korra through the flashbacks. And I just think, I don't think you'd necessarily work anything out from this, but I'm going to play it safe. By not reading the end of that sentence. Yeah. Nothing too crazy, I don't think, but just for safety. If that makes sense. A cutscene from the episode. I'm surprised I didn't catch that when I went through these before we started, if I'm being honest with you, Chris, but there you go. A cutscene from the episode involved Lynn encountering former subordinates in Republic City Police as she was going to jailbreak Korra's friends. You're right, it is just a full-on jailbreak. She just, like, broke in. I just kind of assumed, like, she used to be chief of police, like, she just sort of weaseled her way in. But, yeah, you're right, she just full-on broke the law, broke them out. Cool.
Yeah, I think given that the last time we saw her, she was like, "I'm going rogue." Like that was my reading.
You know what? I got criticised at the start of this podcast for inventing bad dialogue for the show. I think that's pretty fucking rich. Coming from, "I'm going rogue."
Fair. I'll give you that.
But no, I to be honest with you, Chris, if she'd said I'm going rogue, I think I would have liked it all the more. But anyway.
Fair.
Yeah, so a cutscene from the episode involved Lynn encountering those subordinates as she was going to jailbreak them. The police would have tried to stop her, only for Lynn to intimidate them into letting her pass. Like, you know what I can do. Come on, guys, just let me through. Don't make this difficult. I don't want to knock you out. I don't want to have to do damage. So yeah, I kind of wish we'd had that scene. Because I think it would have been clearer what happened. Clearly, I was confused by that. It's possible, though, that I just misread the scene or missed one key shot. Like, maybe I glanced away from my screen at the exact wrong moment and missed, like, a shot that made it a lot clearer what was going on. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and assume I'm at fault here for not really tracking exactly what happened there. Let's see. I'm just looking at a spinning circle right now, Chris. I've tried to scroll down to the last two, and I'm waiting.
Just one of those classic laptops that won't let you scroll down. You know, we've all been there. In,
well, I think this laptop is from like 2012, maybe. So like it's old. It's real old. We dug it out just for this purpose. So I'd have because I thought about doing it on my phone, where I could scroll it, but then I didn't want to have my phone too close to my microphone because then you'd get that sound. Oh crap! I've just double checked, Chris. This laptop is from 2010, so this laptop
there you go.
is very old. Okay, so book one story supervisor Colin Heck wrote Bolin's moments of smelling the alleyway he was brought through during his kidnapping in the Revelation. What? So sorry. What? Let me reread this. Book one storyboard supervisor Colin Heck, I follow this sentence so far, yes, fine, wrote the Bolin moment of smelling the alleyway he was brought through during his kidnapping in the Revelation. Oh, I see. So in this episode, one of the ways they sort of backtrack to find where they took Bolin when he was kidnapped was through the smelling thing. And that was written by Colin Heck, the storyboard supervisor. There you go.
Right, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's very confusingly written, or I'm just not with it at all today and couldn't pass that. The episode is a nod to old film noirs, notably in Tarlok's decision to hide Avatar Korra in a cabin outside of the city, as use of a hidden mountainside cabin by villains is a common plot device in many such films. Well, there you go. No cars exist this week, sadly. Or Sotomobiles exist, as it would be. So apologies, I don't get to make the noise. That's the rules.
It's all right. Yep. No, that's fair.
So I think that's everything, except for all the places people can get us. Patreon if you want to support us there. Help. Daddy got to buy a new laptop.
Yeah, man, now more than ever, we need that sweet dollar. Usually we don't. Usually we're like, do what you can, but now we're like, stop spending your money on Prime and spend it on Hit. That was a joke about that energy drink, not Amazon Prime. You know what? Nobody listening to this is 10 years old, are they? It's fine.
I saw. I don't know if it was fake, but I saw a picture of that drink now being sold for $9.99 per can. Is that right? Is that real?
Someone got banned from TikTok because they're a shop in Sheffield or something that I didn't even know this drink existed until last week. That's how out of touch I am.
Yeah, I don't think anyone other than the people that care about this drink knew this drink existed until last week. You're not on your own.
A shopkeeper sold a box of 12 cans for £1,000, and apparently KSI went nuts and was like, please, can people stop doing this? This is insanity. So, yeah.
That's crazy, man. I don't get it. I bet it's shitty. There's no way it's good, right? People just want it because of the brand, like because of the connection to the YouTubers, that's what this is, right? Maybe. That's what they're paying for, right?
I assume so, but I thought mate, again, last time I thought those YouTubers didn't like each other. I was like, it's a collaboration between who, weren't they?
They worked out their shit. They got in the ring, Chris. They threw some punches, and then now they're mates. It's that classic story.
And now they're making an energy drink. It's that classic. It's that classic, relationship. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Batman versus Superman. They punch for a bit, then they're mates. Godzilla, King Kong. They punch for a bit, then they're mates.
Yeah, fair enough.
All we need is just Ken Watanabe on the side, just being like, "Let them fight." And then once they've had a fight, they can be mates. It's fine.
Fair enough.
No, I had the same thought, though. I'm making that joke because it amuses me that's like a plot line in way too many movies. But yeah.
I tell you what, Dan.
I also thought they didn't get on.
It almost feels like maybe they were playing up how much they disliked each other for other purposes. Who knew?
But you know what? Here's the thing. I don't care about that because that's boxing. That's been boxing from day one. Like, they've always done that in all combat sports. The two guys get angry at each other on Twitter or whatever, and it's the modern version. But they used to they'd say shit in interviews that was pretty shitty about the other person. And everyone would be like, "Oh, these two guys really hate each other. I'm gonna watch that fight." But come on, these are marketing people. They know what they're doing. They know that the more they do that, the more they sell a thing. And that's not exclusive to the KSI Logan Paul fight. To be honest,
no, not at all. But point is, going back to the point, Dan needs the cash, people. He needs a new laptop.
Yeah, can't you tell I'm going insane?
I can, Dan. You know how. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it again, Dan. Do you know how I know you're going insane, baby? You know how I know the laptop's affected you?
Yeah.
Thanks to the laptop, you forgot to mention Daniel Radcliffe's glasses again, didn't you?
Oh, for crap's sake! Because I don't have my notes file, and it's so. God damn it! The way I always remember.
I know why.
The way I always remember is it's always just in the little trivia section of my notes file that I always use, and I put the trivia around it so it's there, and then I delete the trivia from the previous episode, but I leave that there, and then I put the rest. But that notes file is gone. I don't have access to that.
I know what's happened, Dan. I know what's happened. I'm just not sorry about it. And I understand if the listeners are listening, going, "You've brought this on yourself now, Chris." That's twice now, but I unfortunately, there's a debate in my head between he's forgotten it, fuck yeah, and but the listeners might think you've forgotten it, and you haven't forgotten it. You remembered. You should tell the listeners that you've remembered, and I'm aware that is counterproductive to my overall long-term goal here. But,
yeah, because now, Chris, like last week, you've given me a perfect opportunity to say, are you referring to the piece of trivia in which that Daniel Radcliffe went through 160 pairs of glasses across the Harry Potter franchise?
No, because that's not trivia.
What's wrong with that trivia?
It's you being a prick. It's not. I don't, mate. It's got to the point where I've forgotten whether it is actually even. Oh yes, no, yeah, no. It referred to the whole franchise. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, where can the people give you some money to get a new laptop, Dan?
And stop me from going insane. Yeah, I think actually, to be fair, my insanity today is more linked to sleep deprivation than lack of laptop. But the sleep deprivation.
I don't think it's been too bad. Once we got on track, we were fine, I think, today.
I hope so. Who knows? Yeah. Anyway, if you feel sorry for me after listening to this and you want to support us, you're welcome to go to patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, where you can give as little as $1 a month. And hopefully, assuming I've been able to edit these and you've been able to hear them, we'll be able to give us as little as $1 a month to get episodes a week early. We're also going to do some bonus content on there a little bit later this year. Really excited about that. We've teased it enough. We need to actually at some point do those soon, and I'm excited about it. It's going to be fun. Nice short ones. Actually, probably what we should have been doing, Chris, is doing those alongside these Korras. It's just occurred to me.
Yeah, probably.
Because a Korra recording is half the length of a Rewind Review recording, and if we try to do them alongside Rewind Reviews, it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, that's true. But, you live and learn, Dan.
Yeah, maybe there's still some time to do it. Who knows? Anyway, but yeah, there's a little mini podcast that we've agreed that we'll do at some point, and I'm excited about it. It'll be like, I think it'll only be at max like 20-30 minute episodes, but they're really fun as an idea. I'm excited about it. I suspect probably not even that long. My initial premise was 15 minutes, but I just know what we're like.
Yeah, I think that is insanity if you think that's going to happen, but there we go.
Yep. Anyway, so yeah, support us patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. Or if you've got thoughts on anything you just heard us try to say, you can go to youtube.com/nothingbutstatic UK, find this very episode's post, again, assuming I've managed to find a laptop to edit them on, and then you can comment underneath with your thoughts. Or, you don't want to do that, email us, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk. Of course, you can support us in the other ways, of which, subscribing to the YouTube channel, liking some of the videos on the YouTube channel, or reviewing our podcasts on the various podcast platforms that exist. They all have their own review services. Usually you can do it in-app, which means you don't even have to go on like a special website. You don't have to pull out a laptop of your own. You just need to whack your phone out, open up the app you're already using to listen on, and hit stars, likes, reviews, thumbs ups, whatever they are. That'll support us that way. Of course, you can tell a friend. You got a friend who likes Avatar, likes Korra, let them know. Oh, there's a podcast you might like. You can do that. That helps us too. Or you can, of course, just keep listening. We appreciate that too. That in itself is a wonderful way to support what we do, and we're very grateful that you all choose to do it. You can, of course, as well go support Raphodraws, who I'm going to do this from memory because I don't have the notes that have this, but I think Instagram.com/Raphodraws, RAPHODRAWS, and then I think, let's see if I've got this right, launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws, I think, is a launch links page that has links on it to Rapho's other places. So, like, Redbubble account where you can buy, like, phone cases with Rapho's great art on it and a bunch of other different related links, so you can go support Rapho. Rapho, again, very nicely let us use that artwork we use at the beginning of on the videos and on the podcast of Appa at Sunset. It's wonderful. Really great piece of art. Go support the person who did it. Good art and artists should be supported. I would actually argue you're probably better off supporting Rapho before you go on our Patreon.
Yeah, they probably need a laptop as well. So.
Support an actual artist rather than these two rambling twats, is what I would say.
Yeah.
But anyway, with that in mind, I think that's all the things. Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate you sticking with us through some of the issues we've had on this series of Korra. Mostly just me being sick and insane. But yeah, that's everything for this week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham,
and we'll speak to you next week when we sit down to review an episode title that's no longer on screen because it's ticking. I've got the rainbow circle, Chris. Is it going to come? Is it going to come? Yeah, there it is. It's called Turning the Tides.
Wait.